Folks, thanks for joining me at Side Hustle Army Podcast. Today, I am joined by a very special individual. He is an expert in the field of superpowers, so much so that he's closing out the final episode of this season of the podcast. He's a published author who routinely sells his books for upwards of $2,500. He's been featured on the cover of Forbes magazine. He has groups online with the Dream 100. He hosts a yearly event called Dream 100 Con. He's spoken on the stage of Funnel Hacking Live. He was awarded Russell Brunson's Inner Circle of the Year Award, Member of the Year Award, and he's a goat farmer. Cue the lights, the fireworks, the fog, the WWF-worthy, entrance-worthy music. Dana, the over-deliverer Derricks, is in the house. How are you, man?
I need you to intro me on everything. That was amazing.
That's pretty good, right? I practiced that a few times.
That was, what was it, Dana what, Derek?
Dana, the over-deliverer Derricks. It's a bit of a tongue twister. But
well done.
I know that
I couldn't have done better myself.
I know that you're going to over-deliver. You always ask permission, but you always over-deliver, so it's all good. Oh, the goat. You got a goat yelling at us.
I need to get you one of those.
Perfect. Cool, man. So what about that intro? Is anything lacking? You want to fill in any gaps on that intro, or is it just like that's it?
I'm still processing. It was so amazing, man. I need give me a copy of that.
I'll send you a copy of that.
Thank you. I'll have like a Morgan Freeman type voiceover artist.
Yeah. I was trying to embrace the one man, one mission, but I can't quite commit to that voice. So
Oh my gosh. I'm so happy to be here, man. Thanks so much for putting this on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your time, and I'm super excited because I've literally listened to podcasts of you, and I've had to like pause it. Like this is a disclaimer for anyone who's listening or watching, because we are recording this Zoom-wise, but I also rip the audio. Anyone who likes to listen to podcasts on like two times speed or speed and a half, like don't do that. Like take it down to 1 times, pause it, take notes. Like it's going to be good. So we're going to get started.
Yeah.
Cool, man. So first of all, let's talk a little bit. I mean, the way I found out about your whole awesomeness that's going on is I had read .com Secrets, and I talked to someone, and they said there's a lost chapter called the Dream 100, and I was like, what? And then I read that, and they're like, if you want to know more, there's a Dream 100 book written by Dana Derricks, and I was like, what? So I got the book, listened to the audiobook, joined the Facebook group. I was like, what is going on here? Like, what is this? And so just if you just want to quickly kind of go into that so everyone knows the context of what you're up to, and then we'll go into the superpower talk, because that's another awesome thing that you talk about. Awesome.
Thank you so much. So you kind of said it at the top. I am a goat farmer from Wisconsin. I also do marketing and all that good stuff, but I've really mastered and planted my flag in the ground as the Dream 100 guy. So I think it's just crazy to hear someone else read it, but being able to, be featured by Forbes, Inc., Entrepreneur, ABC News, whatever, blah, 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 get on stages, all that stuff. Like, I don't belong there, I'm just being honest. I just do this thing called the Dream 100. Like, that's it. So, like, I'm just geeked out to be able to spread that message to more people. And I already can see how much has changed your life in a very short period of time. So I'm excited and elated to get this message to everybody else.
Awesome. Yeah, and I mean, like, the way that I explain it, and I don't know if I've gotten this from you or someone else, but it's like, the way I look at it is like, there is a river of people out there that want your or my services and product, and it's much easier to go out and dip into that river than to divert that river. Like, that's basically the way I talk about it.
I love that.
It's pretty good, eh?
That's
so. So I'm going to one of the misconceptions, someone I interviewed yesterday was like, oh, I can't do the Dream 100 because it means I spend all day commenting in groups, and I spend all day like kissing people's butts and all this stuff. I was like, whoa. I was like, what are you talking about? And so we talked a little bit about the things she had done, because she's an expert in getting free publicity. And I was like, I guarantee you're doing the Dream 100. So she won a cupcake war, like one of these shows like Cupcake Wars, and she won it. And she used the Dream, she got free publicity for her book, for her bakery anyways. So one of the things she told me she did, and I wanted to run it by you because I think this is a great example of the Dream 100, is that she wanted to sell more cupcakes. So she she created a cupcake bouquet, like a bouquet made out of like cupcakes as the flower things. And she took it to a florist, and she said, what do you think about this? And the florist was like, this is insane. And she's like, can I have one in here all the time? Like, I want people to know this. And she generated a ton of business because people who came in to buy flowers saw the cupcake bouquets and they would hire her to make cupcake bouquets. Like, isn't that like a great example of it?
It is at 100,000% yes. And
Okay, cool.
it's so cool because like the Dream 100 is happening everywhere. And once you get into this Dream 100 world, like all of a sudden business is different. Like your lens on what businesses, like how they do well, is different. Like, so that's an amazing example. It's happening all the time at a local level, just like that. But every single good business has that in common. They're doing it without knowing most of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really like pulling back the matrix. Like, that's what I look at on these things. Like when I learn a concept like the Dream 100, at first it seems kind of nebulous and it's like, what is this thing? But then the more I understand it, the more I see it everywhere. And I'm like, oh, like these people are doing it. These people are doing it. I mean, yeah, it's everywhere. So that's awesome. So one of the things that I stumbled upon a video where you were talking about superpowers, and it's quite fascinating because about 1.5 years ago, I did some personal development work, and it was the first time anyone had introduced me to the concept of like superpowers, that everyone has a unique ability that at which they excel greater than most other people. And I did that, and then I saw a video you did recently about it, and then it really hit home like, okay, not only like having a superpower, but knowing how to leverage it in the context. And I mean, we can talk about it in the context of Dream 100 because that makes a lot of sense. But first off, like, what is the whole superpower thing? Like, what is that, and what's the value of us figuring out what our superpower is?
So, and I would love, if you're willing, I would love to use your story as an example as we go through this, because I've seen so much progress in you in the last like month. It's insane. So, when it comes to the superpower, like, the reason that we need to identify the superpower is because without you identifying what your superpower is, you're never going to fully reach your potential in like in everything, but specifically in business and specifically with Dream 100. So what's really important in what the Dream 100 is all about is it's a value exchange. That's all it is. It's a value exchange. So in order for you to exchange the maximum amount of value that you possibly can, you need to know what the heck you're able to deliver, and you have to figure out what your superpower is. So for me, I figured that out, that it was copywriting. So that is my superpower, and that was a God-given gift that I've honed in and have become one of the best on the planet. So having that skill in my head and knowing that that's my superpower it enables me to do things like work with Russell Brunson on a secret project for 3 days and meet his kids, go to his house, hang out, like, because I did this copywriting thing. I knew what my superpower was. So that was an exchange of value. So that's kind of the why. And I don't know how I'll let you kind of guide where we're going with that, but that's why it's really important to identify your superpower.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, really for me, like, I identified my superpower of teaching, like, or making complex things simple, like about 1.5 years ago. But I didn't really put it in the context of business or business expansion. And I feel like the more I embrace it, the more I'm like turbocharging what I do, because I'm just spending so much more time in the zone than I would otherwise. And it's pretty funny. Like when I became a financial advisor, we have these little meeting rooms, and each meeting room has a whiteboard. And I just finished 10 years of teaching. I have a master's in education. I taught overseas for 10 years. And I love drawing out concepts and like all that. And I go into these rooms and no one was ever using the whiteboards. And one day I was like, I'm going to start using the whiteboards. And I started using them. And people who sat in on meetings with me were like, what is going on? Like this is, first off, they were like, you can't do that. You can't draw pictures for people. And I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, no, these are like doctors. These are business owners. Like you can't be drawing your goofy little cartoon pictures. And I was like, no, just watch. And so I drew them, and I literally kept one. The biggest sale I've ever made, I kept it. It was a 1-page drawing of just like 6 different concepts that I took people through. And at the end of it, they're like, cool, we're good to go. And it was like next to no numbers, next to no, like I just made the concept simple. So now in the context of the Dream 100, it's like, okay, like how can I teach people stuff? How can I, take, so I mean, we've already talked about it a little bit, like I wrote the squirreljournal.com. It's going to be available really soon. And so now one of the ways, and actually I might as well just get your feedback on it. One of the ways I'm thinking of getting in front of big influencers, like, is to create a journal that supplements what they've already created. Like if I created like the 1 Funnel Away Challenge journal, or like the 30-day book that you were featured in. I love that 30-day book, but for me, it's lacking a little bit of like a journal-esque quality to like the chapters. So it's like, how can I have something where I'm filling in every day that I'm keeping up with this 30-day challenge of going from zero back to successful business? So yeah, what do you think about that?
I think that was brilliant, man. And how could they say no? So like, well, one of the concepts I share in the Dream 100 launch program is the like concept of like, let's simplify, because everybody's like wondering like how do I get them to say yes to promote my thing or whatever, right? Like, and this is literally, it's this easy. If your thing makes their thing better, they have to promote it, or else their customers are like aren't being served, right? So an example of this too is you're familiar with Tim Castleman, the guy that does the notes. So like so I think years ago he goes to lab events and he takes really good notes. He got a team now and they've got their own like private area. It's funny how to watch his growth. They just took notes at like Funnel Hacking Live, Traffic and Conversion, whatever events, right? And then after the event was over, they would sell the notes to people. And it's like, wow, that's amazing, because I suck at taking notes, right? And then now a few years later, like FHL endorses that, and they actually like these events like have Tim do that for them, and then like they love it because it helps their attendees, right, get better results. So he's the official, he has the official Funnel Hacking Live notes, the official whatever. So brilliant, yes.
That's an amazing way of tapping into a superpower. And it's interesting, like what you said, like I'll see people say like, how do I get into affiliate marketing? Like, cause like a lot of people are like, oh, where do I start? What do I start with? What do I start with? And like I did the affiliate boot camp. My wife and I went through it, and we're like, okay, we're supposed to like make these funnels, and we're supposed to send these emails, and we're supposed to run ads, and yada yada. None of it ever worked until I got really excited about one thing. And the thing that I got really excited about was the One Funnel Away challenge, which is just phenomenal. Like for me, it's the best way someone could get introduced to ClickFunnels is through that challenge. And that's why I've created this group. I mean, most of the people listening to this, at least the first couple hundred, are the members of my group. And once I got excited about it, I started seeing some success with it, because before it was like, oh, there's this thing out there called, I don't even remember what they're called, like funnel expert. Can't remember what it's called. And it's like, I've never even taken it. I've never even done it. Like I can't really endorse it ethically because I don't even know what it is. But I'm supposed to create a funnel around it. So, I mean, I don't think it's a bad way to start, but really when people say like, what should I promote? I'm like, well, which thing are you the most excited about? Like, are you the most excited about the books? Are you the most excited about this, that, the other? Like, go for it. Because if you're excited about it, you're going to, like, I push past those days when things just aren't working very well because I'm just so excited about it.
Absolutely. And the best thing too is like, if you can, like, I actually, I was hosting a roundtable not too long ago, and there was a person that like, there was an awkward moment because they were struggling, and they said that, like, they were trying to promote this thing, and I was like, you're promoting something that you've never done, right? Like, no wonder it's not going well, right? Like, you need to be a star student of the thing, and then you should be screaming its praises, right? So, and I love even taking it another step and getting excited about it, right? Like, the thing should be so good that not only did you clobber through it and it was amazing and it got you X, Y, or Z results, but also you're super excited to get everybody else in it because it's so good. Like, that's exactly what it should look like, and that's why it works.
Yeah, no. So I'm on the third challenge right now, because the first one I had a week of business meetings and I totally missed the week and I dropped the ball. And then the second one, anyway. So this one, my wife, who was totally anti ClickFunnels stuff, is doing the challenge, and she is like rocking it. Like, she's doing it way better than I've done it, like hands down. Like, she's just like committed. But it's also the challenge journal-esque version, like approach to it, that works really well. So I'm going to get back to the superpower a little bit. Like, so one of the things when I talk to people is like, how to identify it? Like, how did you identify it? Like, how did you realize like copywriting is where it's at for you as a skill set that you can like use to get in front of people, you can use to change people's lives?
Yeah. So, quick story on that. So I've always, like, even as a kid and stuff, like, I've always been a good writer. It came easy and natural to me, but it wasn't until I was, I think, about 21 years old. I was in college. I had just wrapped up my athletic career. I had hung up the cleats for the last time, and I was pretty lost. So I had put my business on the side to pursue my football career and stuff. And so I didn't have money, in other words, and that was like my full-time gig. So after I retired from that, I'm 21, I'm in college, which I knew I didn't belong there because I was an entrepreneur, but I just had to finish what I started, right? And I had this night class I'll never forget. And it's 4 hours, which is like prison, right? Like 4 hours on a Friday night, college kid in a class. That's bad. Like, so at the end of it, of course, I'm like belligerently hungry, head straight to Taco Bell, just pure desperation, right? And I placed an order, and I swiped my card, and shockingly, the clerks there are not trained very well in how to handle when somebody does their card gets declined, right? So this kid, $6.11 or something, shouts out, "Sorry, man, your card was declined." Like, I'm like, oh, like, dude, do this gracefully. Like, I'm like, oh crap, all right. And then I like grabbed it and I left hungry. And I remember that drive home, and it was like, yeah, Dana, you need to get your shit together. So the next day, thank you very much to MasterCard. They gave me a $500 credit card, and I literally got in my vehicle, drove straight to Barnes and Noble. I physically filled up a shopping cart with $500 worth of books on every single subject in business I could think of. The second book I read was a book by a guy named Dan Kennedy, who is one of the best copywriters of all time. And everything he said in that book completely resonated. I realized halfway into that book that that's what I was. I was a copywriter. That was my superpower. So it took a lot of like crap to, go through to find it. But I think all of us kind of know deep down what we're really gifted at. And then the thing that keeps us from like, oh shit, that's what I am, that's my superpower, is because it's natural to us, right? It's not amazing to us. It's just what we do. So once we can identify that, like, that's the thing, and then we get the confirmation that however it is, if it's reading a book or if it's hearing it enough times, bam, there it is.
Yeah. And I think, it's interesting. You said you're a pretty good writer, but it wasn't until you you're at a point where you really had to make a change. Like, it was like this was like a desperate time, and you found that book, you read that book, and it kind of triggered. I mean, like, and I've heard you say something which really resonates with me, is like, we grow up wanting to be superheroes, or we grow up wanting, I think it's something along these lines where you said, like, but it's really kind of like the system that inadvertently or knowingly kind of beats it out of us. And like, even with the writing thing, like, I'm a good writer, but like, when I went to school, it's like, well, you can't start a sentence with the word but, or you can't start a sentence with the word because, or you can't do this, or each paragraph has to be 3 lines long. And that's just like super stifling. And that's in the example of writing, but in other areas too, like creativity, like all these other areas where people will get stifled, and then it's like, oh, now I have to actually rediscover my talents. Like, I think I've heard you say something along those lines.
Absolutely. Like, and the thing is you're absolutely right. It does get kind of driven out of us through the school system. Because if you ask a 3rd grader what they want to be when they grow up, you hear astronaut, football player, like ballerina. You hear all these cool things. And then by the time they're a junior in high school, ask them the same question, and it's like, not knocking these professions, but it's just like, this is what they're driven toward. It's like, okay, I want to be a nurse. I want to be a teacher. I want to be an accountant. I want to be this. Like, no, you don't. You don't want to be those. Like, you've been told that that's what you need to be. So yeah, I mean, we could probably rant forever on that, but yeah. Yep, very true.
Well, it's funny, when I became a teacher, I went to this conference, and they're like, oh, most people become teachers because they were really good students. And I was like, not me. Like, I was not a good like, I was respectful, I was quiet, I was all that stuff, but I was usually quite bored. And there was a time, I feel bad about it now, but like in grade 7, my history teacher was like, hey, history or something. She was like, hey, I'd love everyone to write a letter about what they learned this year and how they felt about this year. And I was like, oh, this is finally my chance to tell her that I didn't really study what I wanted, and I didn't really enjoy the class. And so I wrote this long thing. Like, we had to learn things like, what's the state, like, I grew up in North Carolina. It's like, we had to learn what's the state dog of North Carolina, which is the Plott hound. I know this forever now because I had to learn it. And at the end, I was like, oh, like, a lot of the other kids are going to write these letters about how they found this kind of useless and boring, and like, so she can have this feedback to change it. So the day comes, and it's all handwritten, and she knew it was my writing, right? Like, it wasn't like this is like 1990 something. Like, it wasn't like we did it on computers. And she reads them all, and she comes back, And she's like, there's like 35 kids. Like this was like a pretty big school. 35 letters that she read through. And she's like, all of them are really positive except for one. And my face just went like beet red. And the kids are like, who wrote, like, what? And she's like, and so she defended why she taught all those things she taught. And she said something along the lines of, even if you're not studying something interesting, you still have to learn how to study, and you still have to learn how to like follow through with things or whatever. And I was like, I felt, again, she was super nice. So I felt kind of bad because I thought all the other kids were going to take this opportunity to be like, no, like this is a waste of my time.
That's amazing. Wow. I love that. How old were you? Like 10?
I was like grade 7 so I would have been 11, maybe 11. Yeah, 11. I was pretty young.
That's amazing. Actually, and I mentor a 13-year-old kid here, and he's struggling like crazy. And he's very similar to us. Like he wants to be a YouTuber. That's what he wants to do for a career. And I'm like, dude, that's amazing. That's awesome. And so he's struggling like heck in school, and like gets in trouble, and they say, oh, he's got ADHD and all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm resisting so hard the urge to just call the teachers that say that and say, hey, can I be honest with you? Like, he doesn't have ADHD. He's an entrepreneur, and your stuff is just really boring. Like, I'm just gonna tell you the truth. Like, so going back to your superpower and the teaching thing, like in the whiteboard, they're like, no, Galen, you can't use the whiteboard to teach. No, yes, he can, because he's gonna teach it in a way that's better than how you do it, and it's gonna be actually like gonna sink into their brains. So I'm like, yeah, I totally vibe with that, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to go off on the entrepreneurship world, like school was definitely not built for entrepreneurs. Like school was not built for the hyper creative mind. Typically, like the average school was not built for any of that. It was built for, sit down, kind of stay in line. And just like you said, like by the end of it, you have like kind of like 20 to 30 options of things you should do with your life, and you have to pick off one of them. And it's actually kind of funny because my son is 10, and he's a very good student. He's very, like in line, which is awesome. But I am going to get him to do the one funnel away challenge before too long, because there's a lot of people with their kids in there, and it's probably the best way to get him to like, and it's all like super family friendly, like, like there's nothing in there that he could possibly like,
Right.
Whatever. Like I'm not worried about anything that anyone's going to say in there. Right. Like, so I'm super excited about it. Like, and starting like the whole funnel family vibe, like, the whole family getting in there on the business, and like, cause I'm like, dude, like you need to learn this stuff, man. Like I'm just looking at the world and the world he's growing up in, where even that long list of jobs you said people used to kind of tick off, like, oh, I need to be a this or this or that. Like a lot of those things are disappearing. And education is notoriously slow at keeping up with trends. Absolutely. Like it takes forever for one single school board to try to change a textbook, nonetheless keep up with like massive trends in demographics and, internet and all that stuff. Like people just can't keep up with it.
Can you imagine if we would have had the head start that your son's going to get, if we started this stuff at 10 years old? Holy crap.
Yeah. Like, I mean, basically, so he's doing his science fair right now, and he studied electricity, which he was like, oh, I want to know about electricity or whatever. I was like, cool. And so I said, your next science fair is going to be about how much money can a 10-year-old make in a month and a half or 2 months online. And it's a research project. Like everyone's like, that's not science. I'm like, no, it's research. Like that's one of the options is research. And so he's going to take a course. We're going to go through it step by step. We're going to figure out what his abilities are. We're going to do all that stuff. And we're going to see if we can monetize it and help other people. And we're just going to find out what happens. And he's going to learn, like, he's going to be able to build these things. Like, it's pretty simple, like, at the end of the day, to build these websites. Like, anyway, so yeah, I'm excited about it. So one thing I was going to go back to with the superpower that I don't want to forget is, what would you say to someone, because I know there's probably people listening saying, I don't have a superpower, or they're thinking about something that just isn't quite it. And I know that you like you said something deep down inside, we know what they are, but it's hard to see because we're so close to it. And so what tips would you give, like anyone who's listening who's like, man, I do not know what my superpower is? Like, what would you say? Like, what things can they explore, ask themselves to kind of like help figure it out?
Yeah. So like, I want to, so don't think that it's like you have to be a superhero to have a superpower, right? Like, it's not this like magical thing that nobody else on the planet can do. It's like figuring out like, what are you already gifted with? Like what skill do you already have a natural ability to do really well? And then like, how much have you actually honed in on that skill? So like, I'll give you an example. So let's look at two different scenarios of mothers. Okay. So we have mom A, has 5 kids and still finds time to go to the gym every day, still finds time to cook healthy and is fit, right? That's mom A. Then you have mom B, and excuse me, go back to mom A. Mom A doesn't realize that that's impressive. It's just her daily routine, and she's just fit. That's who she is. Mom B, 5 kids, doesn't have time for the gym, doesn't have time to cook and eat healthy, is unhappy with her weight, is unhappy with her looks, her health. Mom B looks at mom A and says, how in the world are you doing that? Right? Like that is amazing, right? So mom A has a superpower of being able to stay fit and healthy despite having 5 kids that mom B wants and would probably pay money to be able to figure out how to do, that mom A is sitting there, doesn't even realize it's cool, doesn't even realize it's her superpower. So that's the stuff we got to look for, is like, what is the stuff that's naturally like we do really well if we could look outside looking in, that someone else would consider to be an awesome, amazing thing.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And it's interesting, just like you said, like the one mom who's just kind of doing it. Like for her, it's like, oh, of course I buy, all my meals on Saturday and I cook them and I freeze them and I have a chart or whatever she's doing to make that happen. For her, it's like, well, of course I do all that stuff. And the other one's like, I have no idea what you're doing and how you're doing this. And that's pretty awesome, that comparison. Yeah, I mean, another thing, like one of the things that I say to, like, and you hit it where you said, I love that you said you don't have to be a superhero to have a superpower. Like, it's not like it's like no one else, it's not like no one else on earth is good at teaching. Like, obviously there's a lot of people that are good at teaching, but like how many people are good at teaching and they are, in my case, advisors? Like, I'm the only advisor that I know that has a master's in education. Like, maybe there's another one out there, but I've never met one. And so it's, and I've heard you say that too, like you can kind of niche down a bit to be like, okay, what am I the best at? Like, maybe I'm not the best teacher in the world, but I'm quite likely the best teacher / advisor in Canada or Ontario or the town I live in. Like, I mean, I can really like eventually get to the point where I'm saying I'm the best at X, Y, Z. Yeah.
Ding, ding, ding. That's the thing we're looking for. Because when I read that book and I realized I was a copywriter, I wasn't one of the best in the world at the time. I just knew that that was my superpower that I needed to go and hone in on over time. So like, same for you. Like I saw the bells going off and the light bulbs, because you realize like this is, it's way too much. It's not that hard. It's like, dude, my gift is I teach really well, way better than other people. And you're now honing in on that, doubling down on that, right? And very soon, if you're not already, you will be the best advisor in all of Canada, and then hopefully even in the world, because you identify that and you double down on it, hone in on it over time.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah. And I mean, it's funny because when I used to hire and train advisors, and they'd go to these training sessions and they'd come out like completely confused. And I'd be like, oh, what are you confused about? And they'd be like, oh, I don't understand this thing and that thing and this investment. And I'd be like, oh, let me map it out for you. And they'd jokingly say, oh, I'm going to frame those drawings. And I'm like, oh, ha, ha, ha. I'm like, anyone could do that. Like, what do you mean frame it? And now looking back at it, like, holy cow. Like, yeah.
Right.
And yeah, and so that's what I say to, like, the other thing I say to people is, like, ask the people you know, like, what are you the best at? Because actually, I actually have a bit of a theory around superpowers. Like, there's different layers of it. And like, I talked to someone who said it's kind of like a cheerleading squad, like the pyramid of the cheerleaders. Like, there's like one head cheerleader that's like the thing, but then they take turns like being on the top. And so like, it was actually recently where I realized that like my love of teaching and making things simple for people comes out of the fact that I care about people a lot. And so when I see someone who's confused, or I see someone who doesn't know where they're going, I feel bad for them and I want to help them. And that's part of why I developed this skill, is like a combination of caring and like communication. Like when I see two people talking and I can tell they're not listening to each other, and like a simple intervention of like, I think you're saying this and I think you're saying this, and then like getting them back in line, like I just like, I can't help but hop in those moments. And I think it's, anyway, so it's kind of like this different thing, like the teaching, but also like some sort of like a caring aspect that they kind of feed into each other.
That's awesome. I really like that and appreciate that too, because I think teachers in general, or those that teach, get accused of being those that couldn't go and do, right? But I think you're blending the two, which is incredible. And I think that's like your thing. And I think you know that, which is cool to see.
Yeah. No. And like, The other thing that hit me recently is like, so it was kind of funny when you said the example of like the $500 worth of books, because I was trapped in an information loop for about a year and change. Like I was super proud of the fact that I was reading like a book every 2 weeks and like just consuming, but I wasn't practicing and I wasn't turning around and teaching. And like, that's my thing is like, now I can do, like, I love learning and I love teaching. So like now what I'm doing, especially with the OFA, like, yeah, I did it a month ago, but now the people who come in and they don't understand anything, I can turn around and be like, this is what this means. This is what this means. Like I can explain this, and it's super fun because I'm having a ton of fun learning, and then I'm having a ton of fun teaching other people. And I just get to keep doing both. And like, you know, it's not there yet at the time of this podcast, but before too long, in any arena that I'm in, that's what's going to just make me the money, like to make it financially sustainable, is like me just continually doing that, the learning and the teaching. So it's awesome because it all came from like just kind of diving deeper into the superpower.
For sure. So much clarity, right?
Yeah, it's a ton of clarity for sure. And yeah, now I'm just like actively seeking ways to offload anything that isn't like in that superpower. Yes. And I used to kind of judge myself for it, like some of the more menial things I have to do day to day. And it's just like historically been, well, that's just part of the job. I'm like, no, like there's someone else that could do that they probably love it. Yeah. And I don't love it. So if I can find a person who just really wants to do that part of the thing, absolutely, I can just keep doing the thing that I love doing and I'm really good at, and I don't have to like force myself to do this other thing. And
it's purpose too, right? Yeah. Like now, you know, like I don't know about you, but like yesterday I literally didn't do anything except create copywriting campaigns for one of my programs. And it was one of the most fun days I've ever had. Like, tell me that everybody shouldn't be doing that, right? Like it took a dozen years to get here, but whatever. But you know what I mean? Like, right? If you just spent a day doing nothing but teaching, like on a subject you were excited about, like, wouldn't that be the best day ever?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is. And I mean, and that's the other thing that I say to people is like, what makes time stand still for you? Or what, yeah, like what makes time stand still? Like when are you in the flow? Or the other one is like what can you get lost in for hours? And there's one other one, I'll think of it in a minute. I can't remember right now. Anyways, it'll come up. So another thing that you really tapped into in a way that I never fully understood before was the idea of like the attractive character and like how to leverage that. And like, because, and you really like, it's really kind of fascinating because like, you know, you are the goat farmer, right? Like the goat farmer that's been featured on the cover of Forbes magazine. And like, even when I bought your book, it came with like a little like goat themed things. I have the book right here. I don't know if I have the bookmark. Yeah, there you go. The Copyright Professor goat shaped bookmark and a USB drive and like a little canvas, like a little burlap sack. Yeah. And it's funny because it's like, it didn't inherently change the content or anything like that. But like, what does that allow? Like, what does that do to do that and to like to wear the straw hat at FHL? Like, what does that do?
Yeah. So everybody. So in the world we live in, right, where it's like everybody's like, hey, I'll teach you this little widget thingy will help you to convert 2x or 10x this, or like, you know, where it's just like you hear the same bland statement over and over and over. It's like, all right, let's actually take a step back from what we're actually delivering, right? But let's figure out how we can wrap it better. So like I would say, like, you know how every single package in the mail you get in the mail comes in like a brown box, right? Yeah. Could you imagine if for, you know, every birthday or whatever party or event or whatever, you got all of your gifts in a brown box? Like how boring that would be, you know, because like inside, you know, there's something cool, but like, it's just like, like you didn't present that well, right? So it's the same thing. It's like, why don't you wrap it with like cool paper in a cool bow or something? Like make it interesting, make my eyeball look at it, right? So for me, it's like, that's what the goats do. And they've kind of taken a life of their own, which is awesome. And I'm riding that wave and it's true. So like, this is something I think that I've seen a ton of growth as well in you, is like, if we can be like honest here, like your subject matter and the thing that you sell is not a very sexy, fun topic, right? So I've seen you do the same thing where it's like, I didn't know you, like if I'd just met you, I would think, oh my gosh, I do not like the subject that you are really good at. And if you present it in a way that's boring, I will fall asleep and I will want to get out of here immediately. And
Yeah.
then I get to chatting with you and I hear all these awesome, amazing 1,000 lives you've lived and all these crazy stories. And I'm like, dude, like that is your attractive character. Like that's how you should wrap these boxes. So
Yeah.
I would love for you to like share some of that too, because that was cool to watch.
Well, yeah, I mean, so definitely like, so, I first heard about the attractive character reading, some of Russell's books, and like, I'm kind of stuck. Like I hear people say like, oh, what's my attractive character? And they're like, oh, which one have you decided on? And I'm like, it's not necessarily like a drop down list. Like people are like, oh, it's a drop down list. I'm either the this or the this. And it's like, yeah, well, like, and I mean, one of the things that I read you wrote, which was like, what are the stories? Like, what are the most interesting stories you tell people? And so, and I think like, so one thing to back up, I will tell it, but like one of the hesitations I certainly had was, I don't want to sound like I'm bragging. I don't want to sound like I'm, like even when I'm telling these stories and people are like sitting up and listening, I'm like, oh, should I really be the center of attention right now? Like, should I be like, oh, it's not that, it's not that big of a deal that I, moved to a country where I didn't speak the language when I was 21. And, it's not that big of a deal that I almost got kidnapped by Colombian maritime paramilitaries, or it's not that big of a deal that I had to bribe my way out of Venezuela on an expired visa, like all these things that happen. And it's kind of funny because I wrote in my Facebook feed a bit ago, I was like, hey, everyone, I'm having trouble remembering like interesting stories about my life. I was like, what story have I told you? And so people are like, oh, what about that time that rat bit you in the foot because you were sleeping in a dirty shack? And I'm like, yeah, that's a pretty good story. I forgot about that. And then someone's like, what about the time you got carjacked? And it's like, what about the time that guy like tried to grab your passport and you had to jump on the bus to escape him? And my mom is reading this and she's like, I screen capped it because it was hilarious. My mom's like, whoa, like what happened? Because like when I lived in Venezuela, like I couldn't tell my parents things like,
No.
oh, by the way, a week ago I got stopped by the Colombian paramilitaries and I wasn't sure if you'd ever see me again. Like I couldn't tell them that because they would have been like, you have to leave, like you can't stay there. Or
Right.
that like I got carjacked or any of that stuff. And so my mom wrote, like, I can't remember which one it was. I think it was the mugging. And my mom wrote, I never heard this story. And I was like, oh, but I'm surely I told you about the time I got carjacked and dropped off in the middle of nowhere. And she wrote like, stop, I can't take it anymore. And I wrote, oh, sorry. I was like, hey, Mom, 20 years ago I got carjacked. I'm fine.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing.
But
Wow.
but the funny thing is like, and I mean, yeah, you're right. Like my business is not only is it inherently like, or is it not only is it historically boring, it's also something that people don't want to talk about. Like I sell things like life insurance. So I'm like, hey, let's sit down and talk about what's going to happen when you die. Like, don't you want to talk to the Grim Reaper today? Like about what's going to happen? Like, isn't that exciting? Isn't that why you got out of bed? And so and like we're supposed to wear suits, right? Like when I started as an advisor, they're like, okay, you have to put on your fancy suit and you have to walk around town and people are going to ask you why you're wearing a suit and then you can get them as a client. Like that's literally some advice I got early on, which was like, go wander, like, because in the beginning I had like 0 clients. I had nothing to do with my time.
School didn't quite teach you that part. They forgot that, right?
Yeah, so it's like you got to walk around with your suit on and then people are going to ask you why you're wearing a suit and then you have to say, oh, have you heard about this investment product? And they told me that and I'm like, I'm not doing that. Like I do not want to do that at all. And so but like that's the idea, is like it's a very a lot of industries are like this. Like everyone kind of looks the same and talks the same and like you're all supposed to like drive the same car and all that. And so like, the idea of embracing an attractive character for me is like, first of all, it's like, well, but that's not what I'm teaching people. So it should be different. Like I should keep that apart because it's almost like distracting or confusing. And like, I shouldn't be like, why should I be talking about the time I got carjacked? That has nothing to do with the work I do. But like, you're turning that on its head. Like, how are you supposed to stand out?
Absolutely. So to me, I was like, when I started digging that out of you, I was like, literally, there was just mountains of gold. Like that's what that is. Because I remember the first time I'm not a big fan of his, but I think some of the stuff is good, and I saw him live, and he is the real deal. Gary Vaynerchuk.
Mm-hmm.
So I one of the questions that was asked, one of the best nuggets I've gotten from him was a person said, "Hey Gary, like the internet has become so crowded. There's so many people shouting messages. Like, how do you even stand out?" And he very quickly just said, he's like, well, just like anything else, right? Like you just have to be better, right? Like competition has been around forever, right? And so like it's no different than having 7 restaurants in a town. Like if there's 7 and there's only room for 5, like you just got to be one of the best 5, right? So with that, to take that a step further, it's like these stories get people's attention, right? And then if the magic though is like when they're true, and you can transition them from that attractive thing to what you're delivering. So a practical example for you is like, I would not go to your office to talk about life insurance. I just wouldn't. I would never do that. But if you said, hey, Dana, I want to talk about, I want to share with you like the one thing that I got from getting bit on the foot by a rat in Venezuela that's going to cause you to XYZ. And I would be like, dude, I want to hear that story, of course. And then however you can transition them, right, into that discussion that you have to have with the cool, attractive story that got them there, that's like the whole package. And that's what makes the magic work for this, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely gonna go back and re-listen to that nugget because, so I mean, one of the things I settled in on after thinking more about the attractive character, like I said to like I've lived on 4 countries by the age of 32. I had lived on 4 countries in 3 different continents, and I now am a triple citizen. I have 3 passports.
Jeez.
And I'm actually going to put it on my LinkedIn profile. I'm the only CFP in Canada with 3 passports. And if anyone says, how do you know that? I'm just going to say, well, until someone tells me that they've got 3 passports, I'm just going to be the only one. And so, but again, like I wouldn't have done that normally just because I'm like, oh, it's kind of distracting from what I do, or it has nothing to do with what I do. But it makes people sit up and notice. And it's like, oh, I'm actually going to meet with someone who might actually have a few interesting things to say. And what you said was like what I learned about getting bit on the foot by a rat. Like someone said to me, I think it was in one of my interviews like yesterday, someone was like, oh no, I think it was pre-interview where I was trying to encourage them to tell some stories. And they said, well, what are your stories? I was like, well, I've had to like basically smuggle myself in and out of countries in South America because they wouldn't give me the right kind of visa. And so I couldn't travel. So I just had to kind of like figure out how to get across borders. I still went through the checkpoints, but I had to kind of figure out like, how am I going to cross and they don't get mad at me. And so I would pretend not to speak Spanish. I would play dumb. Like I do all these things to like just keep people off my back. And she was like, well, how has that helped you in life or like in your business? And I was like, you know how resourceful and creative and like how much of a problem solver I had to become in Venezuela, being like a 6'1" white guy who sticks out like a sore thumb, who is like easily targeted. Like I used to, I cut out like long socks. I cut off the tops of long socks and I would put it up my arm, and that's where I would put my cell phone, and that's where I would put my wallet, and I would keep enough money to give to people. And I always wore a shirt with a pocket right here, and I would put like, if I had to carry like $100 on me, it was up in my wife and I affectionately refer to them as pit holsters. And I'd keep the important stuff in my pit holsters, and I would carry a crappy cell phone in my pocket and like $10 right here. So if anyone mugged me, I could give it to them and they'd be happy enough to leave me alone.
Sure.
And I actually smuggled my wife's engagement ring into the country, duct taped to my thigh, because when I went through customs, they shake you down. Like they shake you down like no, like a guy like me, because like there's not a lot of people that look like me in Venezuela. Like I stuck out, and everyone assumed I had money that I didn't have, and so like in customs they would shake me down. So I was like, all right, I'm strapping this thing to my thigh, and like they're gonna have to like, if they're not gonna find this engagement ring unless they like strip search me. Anyway, so she's like, what does this help you with? And I'm like, I am like a problem solver extraordinaire, because I had to survive in these situations. And I've taken that whole skill set and I've applied it to financial advice for people who own corporations.
That's amazing. And the coolest part too, like, because you created your story inventory, right? Like part of you asking people on Facebook, like remind you of it. Like now you can go and apply those stories to like prove your points, or like to, get people to understand concepts. And it's in a way that makes sets your teaching on fire, because now it's like you're going to be the most interesting man teaching the most boring subject, right? That's what you are.
Yeah, no, it's a struggle. Like, I mean, getting people pumped about finance, like, oh my gosh, like the stuff that I have to talk about. It's like, I mean, people are usually pretty excited because especially in the first meeting, I don't go into numbers like that much. I go like, I'm really big on goal setting and like, you know, visualizing that goal and like, why is that goal important? Like, I really want people to get fired up about what they're headed towards, whereas people think they're going to come in and talk about like percentages and like all this other stuff. And I'm like, we'll get to that. Like, we'll get to that, but let's do this first, because it's like, I'm also going to go crazy if all we do is talk about that other stuff. Like, I'm not going to have fun.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Cool, man. So, I mean, we have covered a ton of stuff. Like, this is nuts. I've actually blocked off the next hour and a half to make sure this recorded properly, because I had an issue yesterday with 2 podcasts, which drove me a little bit nuts. B, like, go through this and like timestamp this thing. Like, all right, what did we talk about? And just like absorb it all. So this was awesome. Anything else you want to add? Anything else, you know, like anywhere I post this, I'm obviously going to put a link to your book, The Dream 100. I highly recommend the audio version, which comes with it. Dana goes off the cuff. He sneezes a few times. Like, it's really awesome. It's just cool how you just kind of, it's like very stream of consciousness, very much like you're writing, like very easy to like ingest, very non-traditional in the sense of like, you know, I don't care if I start a sentence with because or but, like, you're definitely not constrained by those like imposed things. So yeah, if you got anything else to add, like, go for it, man.
Oh man. Well, I just want to say that you are like, so having you in my Dream 100 launch program has been an absolute treat. I really appreciate and enjoy you a lot. Hope you're going to come to Dream 100 Con so I can meet you and say hi and all that good stuff. But in any event, I think everyone should just like look at you as an example of how this stuff can get you out of whatever funk you're in, if you're in a funk, or just even just add more value and purpose to what you're doing professionally, so that, you know, man, look at the impact you're having now. It's generational, getting your son involved in this stuff. So it really is a big deal. And if you could just like, for those that are listening or watching or whatever, like just take the few minutes to really just shut off stuff and really think about what the heck your superpower could be. And then, you know, double down on that. And that, just doing that is going to lead you to a happier, more fulfilled career. So I think just if we could leave people with just, please just go do that, and you can enjoy the way you work like Galen and I are.
No, I think that's awesome. And one thing that I'll add, if you don't mind, is like, I think sometimes people overcomplicate the Dream 100. And I also think that people don't realize, like, I didn't realize how many people are out there willing to help me succeed. Like, I have a friend, I just wrote him. He's a doctor in town. We don't know each other super, super well, but I was like, hey man, I need some more responses to this survey about a course I'm building. And you obviously had a lot of friends who are doctors on Twitter, and I know you tweet. Would you mind just retweeting my tweet to try to get some more survey completions? And he's like, yeah, man, absolutely. He's like, I can't get to it today, but you know, like maybe tomorrow, like that. I was like, actually, like Monday morning is best. And he's like, I'll do it, man. And it's like, that's just one person I knew who has a slightly larger audience of the people I'm trying to get in touch with. Like, it's not like I went after like the minister of health, you know, like it was just a guy I know who's a really nice guy who's going to do this little favor for me that's going to help me. And so like, I guess that's one thing, like when it comes to actually applying these concepts, it's like, it can be quite simple. And yes, like we can shoot higher, like we can punch above our weight class, like some of the time, but it's also like it's out there. Like the ability to get like a few people to help you out, like it's out there.
Absolutely. And I love the way that you said, it's like, we underestimate how many people are like willing to help. And I think it's a great analogy that I try to use is like when you Dream 100, like you should go up to the plate and you should try and hit home runs. Like you should. Yeah. But at the same time, that's not how you're going to win the game. You win the game by hitting lots of singles and doubles and just doing that over and over. So that doctor is a perfect example of that.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, people, I know you've probably paused a lot of times along the way and taken notes. This was amazing. Thank you so much for joining me, Dana. This was incredible.
Thanks for having me, man.
Awesome.